Or how about I start?
Yeah.
So Frank and I met way back at a prior engagement, a place called Dex. They were in this very lucrative area called the Yellow Pages. It's the hottest new thing. It's coming back, trust me. But, it was at a time when there was still a hope and a dream that could be transitioned online and that business could, evolve. And that's where we met. So I was just, a W-2 guy there. And Frank's company came in, helped us with a couple of different projects. And that's where we got to know each other. And then fast forward a few gigs, I'm at Data Science, this, ambitious but short-lived little company. I was tasked to kind of build a team, and one of the best people I found to hire was Pramit.
Thanks for the kind words, Kyle. Yeah.
For sure. So then, yeah, Frank, you've gone on since then. I know Snowflake will come up, but what are some of your top bullets here?
I started off, I got a BSCE at Stevens. Then, I was in the Air Force for 4 or 5 years as a captain, ran a lot of technology projects there. And then pretty much since then, it's just been pretty focused on project management, data, or entrepreneurship, right? I started that company in 1999, and I worked at City Search, Universal Studios. Those were really like my last full-time jobs in another consulting company. And yeah, then I ran that for like 20 years, became, one of the top Snowflake data superheroes. And, now I'm mostly focused on Snowflake native applications, but I make investments too. I invested in this company called EV Connect, did pretty well with that. And then I just recently invested in connectivity.com. And so we're working on some generative AI, basically approaches towards both business listings, now that you talked about Dex, and Yellow Pages. So there's still a need for, like, Yext is kind of the big one, and there's another one, Bird Eye, that do like reputation management listings. I basically partnered with this guy building these Snowflake native apps. And
for the humble listener, what the heck is Snowflake?
It's a cloud. They'll tell you something else. They'll say it's the data cloud. But when it started, you can really think of it as a competition, at least in the beginning, between all the regular, major cloud vendors. Like Google has BigQuery, Snowflake competes with that. Amazon has Redshift, Snowflake competes with that, even though I think most of Snowflake is done on Amazon. And then Microsoft has Azure or Synapse, and Snowflake competes with that, even though a lot of people have moved towards things like data lakes with Databricks. And now Snowflake and Databricks are kind of in this big war to capture, generative AI, pretty much everything that's happening within data products. So, Snowflake's released Snowpark that is in all these kind of new ML type capabilities. So they're, 2 or 3 years ago, we were actually a big partner with both Snowflake and Databricks, and we would deploy them together. And now they kind of want to basically eat each other's pieces. So, like Snowflake has a ton of data science capabilities now. They didn't really have that 2-3 years ago, and we would use Databricks. And so, now Databricks has Delta Lake and other things that go into Snowflake's world. So anyway, it's it's now the data cloud, but it's, for most people, it's still like a cloud database.
Well, we've all got data in common, but there is a separation here. Tell me if you agree, Pramit, but between like this underlying plumbing infrastructure stuff we just touched on and like, let's get some real actionable insights going. Where do you fit in?
I would say this space of ML or LLM. I feel in this space of ML and LLM and so forth, the boundaries with respect to division of labor, whether lower the stack or higher up the stack, is very thin. One decides to build a custom model. First, it would be about model training. But then be like, oh, we need to increase the inference. Then suddenly you're talking about the inference aspect of things. So it starts to become a little bit operational. Inference is done. Okay, that problem is solved. Then I need multiple versions of it. So now we're moving towards the aspect of ML ops side of things, like keeping versioning, then keeping track of the info that is flowing through the models, and so on and so forth. So this need of moving, starting either higher up the stack and going down, or being lower the stack and then going up, it's a natural occurrence. I feel just depends on how we mature. So in terms of how I fit in, observing the space along with you, Kyle, when we are data science and continuing that collaboration further has made me realize the need to be hands-on. So I'm a very hands-on guy. I can move up from lower the stack to higher up, and from higher to lower down. And since I've been playing around, especially around like the startup scene, this becomes even more important because we are less on number of hands who could help, right? So you may have to start a project and then define the business objective, but then you may not be a lot of hands to be at the same wavelength. So you have to do the prototyping. Then soon you realize you're prototyping, but that got sold. So then you have to move from it being prototyping to be production ready and so on. So yeah, so in short, I like to stay on the bleeding edge of things, and then being hands on in the space, so that gives me the flexibility to provide guidance on maybe how we add niche to our product accomplishments, or if we have to innovate and so on. Currently, I work as lead scientist, lead ML scientist at H2O AI, and the company started with the open source ecosystem of things. In fact, was one of the first ones to commercialize the auto ML or auto modeling aspect of ML things. And since then, we have moved into enterprise market, and we pretty much touch upon all aspects of machine learning, LLM, and howsoever we define the whole ecosystem of things. So we like to say we collaborate and compete with a lot of other players in the market in the open source community and enterprise.
Well, you mentioned auto modeling of ML, and I mean, not just LLMs, but even ML in general. We're seeing at least the product pitch that it gets more and more automated. That perhaps there's not going to be feature engineering in the future, or people really getting their hands dirty on data. Do you think that's a believable promise?
Um, I would think so.
Yeah,
So if we historically see in this last 5 years, just before the whole trend around LLMs, we have always managed to move up the stack. So initially it was like, oh, which model to build. So with the maturity in the community as such, we have moved up the stack. So there's so many benchmarks and literature surveys and so forth. So for a non-expert to get started now than what it was maybe 5 6 years ago is much easier path. They can install a library or take one of those enterprise solutions and get started to 80 90% accuracy right off the bat. So that's a huge win because
sure.
that lowers the risk of starting your own initiative and so forth. But in doing so, we will always move up to better challenges. So initially, maybe it was just about the data that we had and all the modeling thing, feature engineering you mentioned, just with respect to the data we have. Now we have moved up the stack. So now if we take the aspect of LLM, when we're asking for answers for information and so forth, initially the problem was, okay, the LLMs are trained or time stamped at a particular data set. So then how does it get access to more info? Like, okay, can we provide info on the fly and ask these models to take that into consideration with all the past history and then get information? Like the traditional things that we used to worry about with respect to feature engineering and so forth, a lot of those problems have been solved, and there is a better path to get started now than it was 5 6 years ago. But there are other complexities, other problems that will always be there, and we keep moving up the stack in terms of the interesting problems to solve.
So 2023 was a hell of a year from a technology point of view. I mean, where humanity started and where we ended, there's so many leaps forward. Is there anything in particular that impressed each of you guys in that regard?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, geez, we've been through so many different changes. Like I don't even remember when I really first got an internet in the 90s. I think this by far is the biggest transformative year that we've had in quite a while. Like you look back and there's so much stuff about blockchain and crypto, all that stuff, but those are like I don't even know if I'd put them at, and maybe I'm wrong, but 1% of what this is doing. This is a massive shift. For me, there's a couple major things that I saw, and one was that article I wrote, The Automation of Automation, and I think what's really changed for me when it was like January or February. To be honest, it took me a couple months. Like I played around with it, but I was just like, it's not that good, or I don't know. I didn't want to like accept it. But then like January, February, I started really digging in and I started messing around with just all sorts of different prompts with both Bard and ChatGPT. And I realized like, whoa, this is like transformational. You can already see it with, there's so many companies putting this into their products. Like I was on a demo yesterday with another Snowflake partner called DataOps Live. They basically have this data ops system. And right within it, on this new part of the product, they're putting in the LLM. Is just like you start talking to it around kind of the data modeling aspects. It's fascinating to me, like how quickly in the last year you'll see the LLMs embedded in everything with products. And I did neural nets like, I don't know, 2000. Back then, it was so hard to train things.
The software was primitive. That was a big part of it. Set aside the GPU.
Yeah, exactly. And it was cumbersome to do anything. Like that's rough. And even until this, I'd still say there's always types of cumbersome things. It would really take a lot of engineering. Like, yeah, okay, the guys at Netflix and Facebook, you got super smart guys, they can do it, but you didn't expose it to these 10-person or even 1,000-person companies who just don't. I mean, there's just millions of companies that don't have anybody who's like a data scientist who can go beyond basic stuff. Like, like the term frequency, that type of stuff. Like even doing that was hard for anyone who wasn't really a data scientist.
Do you know how to code? Are you looking to supplement your income, level up your career, or gain AI experience? If you answered yes to any of these, you have got to check out Data Annotation. Data Annotation pays you to train AI models by solving and reviewing code problems from home, on your own schedule. This is flexible and remote work on your own terms. It's really easy to get started. Head over to the link I'm going to give you, create an account, take the starter assessment, and then complete your first tasks and get paid. When you go to the link I'm going to give you, there's details about how much they've already paid out, average per hour, and everything else you need to get started. Head over to dataannotation.tech/programmers. That's dataannotation.tech/programmers.
Where before a data scientist really had to think through things. I mean, we did stuff with fraud detection with GoTo and Overture, and with some really smart guys. I remember back like 20 years ago, but that stuff was inaccessible to the masses. And now I think it's insane, like what if someone just wants to get into it, what they can do. That being said, I talked to some really smart guys, and some are retired or whatever. There's really good engineers, but some of them haven't really checked it out. And even marketers. I know it sounds crazy, but I know a bunch of CMOs who I'll be kind of paying them. I'm saying, hey, this stuff is changing everything. Like the things we can do. And they'll be like, yeah, I got to check it out. I just haven't had time. That's my take, or part of it.
Well, Pramit, same question to you. 2023, what impressed you the most?
Accessibility and creativeness. Personally, I feel the whole hype and the trend that we started with the whole ChatGPT noise was accessibility. These models have existed, like bigger players have been experimenting on it over it for quite some time. But what we didn't have for you and I to have access to those models, or we'll have to jump a lot of hoops to get access to it. To OpenAI's credit, I felt that the great thing, at least from my perspective, is they enabling it to the world.
Yeah.
Even if it's primitive, enabling that access to a lot of the whole mass has enabled the world to unleash the creative aspect of things. Sure, there is population who may be still hesitant to adopt. So there is the adoptability curve. But even at the higher level, what it can or cannot do is just getting access to an interface where you can ask a question, get a response. It has opened to automate or imagine so many great stuff. I don't know, this is an assumption, but sometimes I feel they themselves might have been surprised in terms of the ideas that people came up with as they opened things up. Maybe that has influenced how they've gone about changing their business strategies and so on with respect to giving access and with respect to this whole LLM market. And that has created a big problem also as well, maybe for bigger enterprises. For me, the thing that I would say 2023 highlight with respect to our space would be accessibility and creativeness. Like I'm like surprised. I'm thinking of an idea. By the time I'm like done, oh, maybe in the morning when I wake up, I'm going to bed thinking, oh, this is a good idea. I'll work on it. I get up in the morning, search, I already see, oh, there are already 5 or 10 project people have already started working. So the pace with which people are innovating and stuff, like to me, this feels like the start of a new boom. Like I felt like the ML was sort of going into this winter again, where like in terms of, oh, what do we do next? Okay, so we have solved all these problems. So it's like, okay, how do we take this to apply to business use case, which has its own curve, with other challenges and so forth, and that will always improve over time. But in terms of like, okay, what is the next big thing that will help us to move to better challenges, like better problems? And I feel this 2023, with the ideas that people have come up with, collectively, it has forced us to evolve a little bit. It may be a very tiny step, but it has helped us evolve. Like Frank was mentioning about marketers maybe not having an idea, but some marketers already having an idea, using a lot of these tools to design their promotion strategies, design their marketing strategies, creating content, creating videos, generating data for like more involved data use cases and so forth. Like to me, getting this access to this common masses, like all of us, it's to me it feels like the biggest one step forward that we took. It has pushed everybody. Everybody is rethinking. Everybody's trying to figure out whether it's about raising money, starting a new startup, or thinking seriously as in terms of like personal assistance for everyone, basically. Like you're thinking, at least trying to do something. To me, that I would say is like the biggest boom.
Yeah, I'm impressed with how democratized it's been. As you say, we can sign up for any of these APIs, the OpenAI one or whatever. I think at scale, it does get a little expensive, the inference costs, but to just start your own new business, you don't need a major seed round anymore necessarily if you can build a tool on these fundamental technologies. I think also though organizations like, you want to roll something like this out, people are going to be concerned, somebody's going to show up talking about SOX compliance. Maybe we want to train the model on our data, but we don't want that data getting out into the rest of the world. Our industries and companies, do the tools exist? Are we ready to make those big steps forward, or is that still down the road?
Are we ready? So, in terms of like SOC 2 compliance and other privacy and security related certifications and so forth, so a lot of these bigger players are already coming out with encryption strategies and a lot of this certification, whether it is for medical being HIPAA compliant and stuff. So, I think Google already offers a lot of those stuff. And historically, or we went through an adoption curve when we started adopting a lot of the cloud resources, a cloud compute. Remember a time when, oh, should we do it on AWS or should we have our own private clusters? We went through that phase. And now it's like we don't even think. We
Sure.
spin things up.
It's cloud. The cloud was the answer. Yeah.
Where else are we going to do, right? Part of it is we are optimizing on time, comparing it to cost as well, right? Now I feel that the same phase that we went through maybe 10, 15 years ago, now we are entering that phase again. We're like, oh, should we use this bigger players or should we do something of our own? And they are also like trying to figure out like, what does this mean? So that's with respect to the enterprise aspect of things. So if that seems like a choice for some people, it at least is helping you move forward. So I would say, like, I think in that respect, some of the initial steps are done and people are already making use of it in different ways. Now, there's this other aspect of businesses where any leakage could lead to a catastrophic loss, say banking or a hospital of some kind. Some sensitive data about a patient gets leaked, and then it's $1 million lawsuit that they are facing. So then it's the fear of how much risk do I want to take? Even though these cloud vendors are suggesting XYZ, do I fully trust them? And maybe we will go through that curve as well. So then, can we think in terms of locally hosted models? So no risk, right? If my data is not going on, I don't have to worry about any kind of phishing that might happen or something going wrong. So I want to safeguard myself and my organization. So that's part of it. So now we are seeing this boom or speed in making the open source models as good as the enterprise models that we have been getting access to through a gateway. This is help in reducing that fear that we initially went with. Yeah, so then we have our open source aspect of things. Basically, we have to reach to a point that every organization, every individual is able to build their own model of some kind, and that would start pushing that boundary further. And then this aspect of like, oh, do I worry about my data going over the wire? So then maybe we'll be asking questions in terms, same as we probably were asking with respect to cloud compute. If I do this, am I optimizing on time, or is it a cost, or should I just do it on cloud because it's helping me save time rather than worrying about the data privacy issues and so forth, because maybe that layer has already been built. Either you go through cloud or you use your locally hosted model. Are we ready yet? From my perspective opinion, I would say yes, we are starting to get ready. We are seeing promising performance with the smaller models, locally hosted models, and this is giving a lot more comfort in risk taking to the bigger organizations where this initiative starts touching dollar very closely. That has always been a fear, right? Like, how does business adopt it? And a lot of creative ideas, they start but they don't go anywhere because the dollar value doesn't get attached to it. And that is an important aspect of the whole this life cycle of creative ideas and innovations that we want to do. With the support from open source community and the support from this gateway models through enterprises and stuff, I think this collaborative competitiveness and collaboration between the two, I think, is important, and that has helped like make us ready to embark in this journey of trying to come around these problems.
Frank, what are you seeing when you talk to clients and colleagues and whatnot in terms of the adoption curve? Are people, like big organizations especially, hesitant to pick up and run with these new technologies, or are we off to the races?
This has been definitely 2023 was one of the most innovative years that I can remember. We're in this new stage of like, it's almost like too much content, too much stuff. And I find AI actually pretty useful. I'm not sure it's the best, but to kind of like try to see what I need to focus on. So I think there's huge adoption. I think a lot of the big companies are still sorting it out. Like everything right now is just tons of different, I don't know whether you want to call them proof of concepts, but and a lot of them, they're getting real results too. And, what's different about this, again, since the accessibility is much different than a lot of the data science and other technologies, is, the marketing guys or someone else or sales, they're just not happy with IT, and they're not getting stuff done. It's just not fast enough. The data, it's like, you got to go through the analysts to get to the data warehouse and this and that, so that stuff, if they get any hook into that, it's so much easier for them, right? Or they can just use ChatGPT or other tools to basically craft things and start to automate stuff outside kind of the mainstreams of, what the company wanted you to do, or if it had a top-down hierarchy. It all varies partially on industry, on vertical, on, the leadership that's associated with it. There's a lot of companies that, like the CMO or the CEO or the CTO is like, we got to be Gen AI ready. You got to do this, or, they don't really even know how to start. So that's why the consulting companies are still flourishing. I know the ones I worked with last year, like January through June, it was just like, all anybody want to talk about is generative AI. Like data mesh, all those other things that are around. It's like all that stuff kind of got like a second seat. It really varies, but I think there's enough to get started. But we're just in round one of hundreds of this, new kind of stage. Like people used to talk about how, in 2000, how the internet, or there's going to be Web 3.0, we're just still in this beginning. Well, with generative AI and AI in general, I think we're just so in the beginning. There's going to be stuff that we couldn't even predict comes up. It's hard to see where it's all going. And, ChatGPT just yesterday or this week released all these new tools. Like, I don't know if you can make money off those like you could, off the App Store. So we're just in the beginning of all that innovation that's starting around ChatGPT models, where you and I can just put them out there.
Yeah, that App Store stuff does seem a little sus. Do you think that's a reasonable marketplace where someone entrepreneurial can actually do something of value and make a reasonable amount of money?
I don't know. There's always going to be opportunity. Now, is it the same as there was with the App Store? I mean, but think about it too. The App Store, I can't remember. At some point, I was researching this recently. It's like 1.2 million apps or 2 million. I can't remember. But
which App Store are we talking about? The OpenAI one or like the iPhone?
No, I'm talking about Apple, the iPhone one.
Okay.
I couldn't remember what the stats were. It's like 1 or 2 million apps. And then I was like, well, how many apps are actually making money, are businesses?
Right.
It's 10,000 or less, I think. So it might mean less. So,
that's something though, still.
No, it's still a decent amount. I have to deal with this too. We're building stuff on native apps on Snowflake, and they've kind of launched something. It's not Gen AI. It's just really about data applications. And so, as an entrepreneur, it's tricky because really the best opportunities typically are vertical or niche. You can't be Google. You can't be the big three players and, have this thing that's going to cut across to everything, because there's already incumbents with a lot of those things. It's the same thing with Snowflake, and it's the same thing with, Gen AI. It's like, can you build some niche app? Like, could you build like a predictive algorithm that's so good that kind of acts as a black box that people would pay to use? I don't know, because the challenge is you can have the best technology in the world, but you got to have $1 million to advertise it to anybody, or you have to have some guerrilla marketing strategy that gets your stuff out there. This is a problem with many of us engineers or technologists. We think, we're going to build it and they'll come. But the reality is if someone can pitch some exec and get enough funding, all these companies seem to go after all sorts of little niches to just kind of stand out. So I think it makes it harder for the entrepreneur to carve something out.
Where do you guys think there's been success? Who's done really good or novel deployments of LLMs and these underlying technologies?
Are you talking about smaller companies? Or are you talking about...
Either way, give somebody an award. Who gets the award? I got one to kick off if neither of you do.
You can go first then. I want to think a little bit.
So to be honest with you, I think the most impressive company in some ways has been Adobe. Like, I think of them as a monolith, this ancient behemoth company that probably moves slow, but some kind of way. They got all the diffusion algorithm stuff well integrated into their products. It's super smooth to select things and, tell it to take out a bench or add a bench or whatever it is. And, as quickly as those diffusion models are evolving, like there's constant innovation in the base model being built. They found a way to make that process seamless.
Yeah, that is cool. You are right. And they had a lot of opportunity.
So I would just maybe move up a notch there and then also give credit to Runway ML for enabling a lot of the synthetic generation with respect to video synthesis and the image capability of things as well. To same like what sort of OpenAI did a lot with the text. Initially, they were able to do it with images and video as well for bigger audience. And then, that also enabled a lot of further creativeness. The other one I would say is like the whole ecosystem of startups, companies coming around the content creation with respect to text, whether it is Writer, Jasper. So I use Grammarly a lot. So like a lot of these content creating platforms and frameworks, I feel that they've done a great job in adopting and enabling it. Because if I were to measure in terms of like productivity, it has just enabled, we all write in some form or the other. This prompting or this generating the text, whether it is just a template or an idea or a sketch of what ambiguity and thought process we have been going through, I feel collectively it has helped us to be a little bit more productive. So now if I have to write a blog, instead of starting from scratch and then trying to go through the first iteration of drafting and so forth, I asked a lot of this assistant to help me draft the initial thing. That gives me an idea of what I want to do, don't want to write. And then from there, I do my own stuff on it. But it has helped me maybe save half a day, even if that's the case, or like 1 hour or whatever it is. So I feel like if I have to measure in terms of productivity, for me, it would be the whole space around content creation.
I mean, we've entered the new era of digital pollution, right? Anyone can make content in a second.
So with anything which is, this, I'll use a cliche: with great power comes great responsibility.
Truly.
So now, there's this other aspect that, okay, all this thing is really cool, but then what about the bad actors? So no matter what we do, there will always be bad actors, and so we always will have to figure out ways of how to come around bad actors, preventing, controlling, and so forth. The usual cycle of development and moving forward.
What's awesome about this is the stuff we can do is insane, but if the bad actors, which there always will be, like you said, like I wish there was no such thing. If I didn't, if I worked in security, I wouldn't, because it creates billions and billions and billions of dollars of revenue it's kind of like this nonstop thing. And same thing with Ticketmaster and the bots, they were one of our biggest customers when I had the consulting company. That was a never ending thing of like, we figured out how to block it through this IP or this or that. There's always going to be continuous battles back and forth. But I keep telling, the thing I think that I want to emphasize or just remind people is you really got to think about your data quality or your models, like, protecting them, because something is bad actors and something is you just like all of a sudden you have this algorithm or some type of automation and it's depending on this data and all of a sudden it's null. But you never, someone somewhere in that pipeline never prepared for that. So, if this is an essential thing, that's the danger of AI without basically some type of guardrails or safeguards on it. So I think that what you mentioned is just so true. And the fact that you got to realize there's always going to be bad actors out there. So you got to protect whatever it is you're doing in this, I call it like the data AI automation space, to make sure that no one infiltrates. I'm actually surprised with the digital pollution that there hasn't been worse cases of stuff. And there's a lot of crap out there, but it seems like it's still being sorted out.
Well, let's go worst case. Pick your villain. North Korea, the CCP, the Russians. Like, let's say they've got smart engineers over there using this all for ill. What should we be afraid of?
I mean, it kind of parallels, I think, a little bit of what we're seeing in the Red Sea. I don't know what's going to happen. And this is kind of before I was in the Air Force. This stuff was just starting up in the 90s. There's a lot of people in the military that have been recruited to, we're getting attacked by, I think, China and Russia millions of times a day, all the time on certain things.
Do you mean cyber, or it can't be a million engagements a day? I'd have heard of that.
Yeah, no, I guess cyber attacks. I'm not that close to this anymore.
Sure, yeah.
But when I talk about the Red Sea, it's just, there's a lot of corporate, like those are just ships that weren't ever made to be protected. They're not ready for this. So, in this situation, this is a hot topic because it's just happening now. The government stepped in. So I don't know what's going to happen, because on the business side of things, you see there's companies paying for these cyber attacks all the time, or malware, ransomware. It's not my area of expertise anymore, but I think we definitely got to be concerned, because it's really hurt quite a few businesses. For all the things we're advancing in AI and everything, you do have to keep things locked down so you don't have to pay your ransomware fee. Like this, it seems like it's been hitting a lot of hospitals, a lot of places that probably didn't have the best security. It's not hitting Netflix or Facebook or any of these monstrous companies, because they already have, more protections set up in place. But it's definitely a concern for most smaller systems, and even big systems that just traditionally haven't done a good job of security.
What about you, Pramit? What's scarier, nuclear weapons or AI?
Yeah.
I would say for sure nuclear weapons.
We haven't had an incident in decades. I don't know.
Well, hope so. Hopefully that's the way we keep it.
Right.
But going back to the point of like the digital pollution. So obviously it's an aspect of concern. So, with a lot of this creative access to automation, the overflow of fake information, fake images, stealing of IPs, and so forth, a lot of that would increase. At the same time, when it comes to critical systems, there will be more safeguard. There would be intricate detail and detail oriented safeguarding that would happen. We're talking about like initially just maybe Google search became like a default info. Then YouTube came along. So even if I have to like create a bomb, maybe the worst example to be talking on a podcast, but let's take that as an example. So initially it'd be like, oh, I have to go on Google search and then I get my 10 list pages. I have to pass that information, then figure out what works. And so there is still an aspect of skill that is involved. Now we evolved a little bit more and we have added an assistant sort of an interface which organizes a lot of this information, summarizes you in a much more concise, succinct form, and gives it right at your doorstep. Whether that information is accurate, correct, that maybe needs a little bit more skill level, but that has enabled more people to do something with it. That would also then mean that for us, in terms of like thinking through the privacy policies, the data protection, and the security checks that we had, maybe that industry gets a jump start as well. We come up with new ways, new creative ways. So it's not just about the 10 rules and stuff that we had for protecting sensitive access to sensitive data. We have to think of 20 more use cases. But I feel this is a good problem to have. Because if we don't have these problems, how else are we going to evolve? I'm sure there are people who are already a little bit ahead on this problem. So as we are making progress in making this thing accessible, there might be a group of people who are already thinking ahead. Okay, like these threats are coming. How do we come around? What checks do we have to create and innovate so that we don't fall prey to a lot catastrophic collapse of some kind? So there's like that aspect of hacking, and then there is an aspect of protecting that sensitive information. So I feel like there would be places where we will fall, but I'm positive believer on the collaborative human intelligence. So we will figure out a way.
I think I'm an optimist as well, but for slightly different reasons. I take my optimism from Terminator 2, and it's lesson that you fight a Terminator with a Terminator. So even though, yes, there are all these threats of phishing scams, some grandparent hearing the voice of their grandchild saying, I need bail money and all this kind of stuff, and it's awful and it's criminal, but at the same time, we can use the AI to better analyze the context of these calls and say, does this appear to be a phishing scam, or does this appear to be an illegal wire transfer?
Exactly. Attacker and a defender.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It goes both ways. Well, in the early days of data science, there was this hope that companies and organizations could explore the natural asset of their own data. Data is the new oil. And to some degree, I think that's smart. Like if you had some hotel booking website, maybe you could also correlate the neighborhoods people are searching for to find volume. And, maybe someone wants to build a new hotel would want that information. I don't know how revenue generating an idea like that could be, but do you think we're now in a new era where content holders have to re-explore their data catalogs?
What do you mean by that? Just so I'm clear.
Pick a random company. Let's say it's John Deere. I don't know what kind of data they have, but maybe something about their net information is useful for agriculture, or maybe they could aggregate some sensor data from all the farming equipment and produce some sort of, marketplace of ideas kind of situation. Take the data and turn it into an intelligence product. It's like maybe you have the greatest customer service org in the world. Wouldn't it be good to train a model based on your transcripts?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know how that'll fit into the LLMs, but I can tell you that I did study quite a bit on John Deere and Caterpillar, and those companies, they're actually transforming themselves to be more technology companies, and where people should plan, how things should change based upon weather. So they're basically becoming massive data companies, and I think they do resell. A lot of the money's on some of that expertise, and I know like Boeing is looking to basically every piece of data or sensor that's on the new airplanes to sell that off to other buyers that are interested in that data. So I think a lot of these companies, let's call it, the exhaust data or the operations data, it's become, if not the main business, a very big part of their business. And, their expertise and knowledge and something that differentiates them from competitors too.
Pramit, what do you think?
My vote is like for the whole idea of localizing, fine tuning to different data set. Hopefully, as we progress, the need to do that maybe would increase, would decrease. We'll have to see what kind of success we get with a lot of these open source and smaller models and so forth. My bet is that we would succeed in capturing a lot of these smaller models to be focused on specific tasks and so forth. Should enterprises be enabling ways to access to the rich information that we have, each of these organizations, whichever space they're working on, that's their data is, like you had said, data is gold. Historically, we all go through different cycles and a lot of information is captured and so forth. Whether we are able to get success using a commodity off the shelf generative model, or we fine tune it to for a specific use case so that it's better and so forth. In terms of having localized access or ability to fine tune, I'll always be for it, because that, I feel, that gives enterprises control on how much they would like to do.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's wind up with a little prognosticating and some predictions. Predictions are always hard, especially about the future. But what are you guys, some of your expectations about where things are going for 2024?
Well, I think we're in this unprecedented time of innovation. So what we're going to see a lot of is, the big three cloud players are making it easier and easier to use their systems. For me personally, what I'm focused on is how can I actually make some of this more accessible to people like my family? Because I want to talk about it to them, and a lot of them aren't. It's mainstream because you'll hear that in the news. There'll be something every week on some of the major news channels, but it's really still kind of inaccessible because people just don't want to try it. And another thing we did with connectivity is, how can we use AI with this special data or these services to make it easier? So kind of goes back again to this automation. I see a lot of stuff connecting with each other and making things faster. Like the whole marketing side of things is changing quite a bit, because for me to write, a paragraph or a summary or even a whole blog post and actually, add my intelligence to it, it's so much faster. Everything starts to connect with each other. So you get like a certain acceleration out of that as well. Similar to like Snowflake's data cloud, and when they have the no copy data sharing, you can now, as long as you put in these protections that we also talked about, can get such an accelerated access to data. I don't know if this is that profound, but it's really like I see like more of these like workflows that are going to be so much faster. I think this year we're not going to see that much takeout of humans. I think we'll see this year is more of kind of like last year in a way, like massive increased productivity. A lot of stuff I've seen is around, because I'm focused on it, like testing software or testing data with the data operations. Like that stuff has come like leap years ahead of where it was 5 years ago. So all these things like creating software, and even as you get into robotics and other things, they're just going to be accelerated from where they were as well.
I would build on automation to automation, and that acceleration I feel would only increase. However, I still like to map everything to cost and technical debt, if you have to, in terms of that, right? So there is the hype. There is the need to be talking about, like, if you don't are talking about LLM, maybe it's difficult to raise money even. But then if somebody's paying, they want quality, like Kyle had mentioned. Oh, I don't want to, like, what if the images are garbage and stuff? Or I take an image and realize that it's a IP issue with some other artist with this service didn't properly check and so forth. So this improvement, a push towards improving of quality and the updating on the privacy policies, I think that would also go through sort of an update cycle. And then we're talking about the big three vendors in terms of cloud access and stuff. I feel this 2024 we may see a lot more accessibility through smaller vendors. A lot more cloud vendors of some hybrid form might come up further. Whether it is just to even get access to hardware and stuff. We've gone through phases where there aren't enough GPUs. So what do? So we go to some other vendor. So that's an opportunity. I don't know if it will necessarily be the three big players. Maybe eventually, maybe in the 5 year cycle or so forth, they may come at the top and things may converge. But I feel this 2024 would also be a fair playground for a lot of new hybrid cloud vendors pitching a lot of, like, whether it's a combination of hardware, software, hardware, Gen AI, that aspect would flourish more. And the last point on this, I would say I'm also very optimistic. Well, not optimistic, that may be the wrong choice of word. I'm curious and excited to see what the new form of marketplace Play Store might look like. One of the points that you were talking about. So we know about the Play Store, we know about the Apple Store, and maybe other marketplaces, Samsungs, and so forth. But do we have the need for a marketplace where it is LLM first? So yes, I'm very excited to see how we push forward with respect to this whole idea of marketplace as well. And maybe what I'm not sure of it, is there a need for it to be a Gen AI first? Or the question we should be asking is, what is it that we are missing in the old that we could make use of with this new tech stack that would help us improve what we have, instead of reinventing the whole wheel? So I don't know if there's a need to reinvent the whole wheel, or there's a need to add a cast on the old wheel that we had to make it more robust. So I'm excited for those things.
The marketplace is interesting. Just a quick anecdote. I hired someone a few months ago on one of these freelancing sites to help me renew my passport because I just didn't have time to figure it out. The government's website was very confusing, and just paid them hourly to do the work I didn't have time for. And it worked out great. Everything was fine, but it cost me, money. I think this marketplace, that price will get commoditized and driven down. And if it's like, a reasonable amount of money to engage with a fake professional to get some service done, if it works, it works, and there'll be star ratings and all that. But
I would even go even further, that like the service that, like, for example, the use case that you mentioned, are we going to start seeing glimpses of common people or non-experts in the field of ML, is what I meant, being able to create personal assistant for a job, like you said. I don't have time to get my passport renewed, to the process and stuff. Are we able to define this task that we have as simple rules, and there's some system, whether it is through some playground, some enterprises hosting, or we create, like, it's becoming maybe convenient enough that anyone is able to define this task as some rules and add an assistant to it and be like, yeah, sure, let me help you out. It goes and opens the website, it gives you that information, you're checking on the information, you say, okay, this all sounds good, I'll upload the doc. So I'm excited to see if all of us start to build a lot of this assistant commonly, like an everyday task. We don't even think about it. Oh, we don't have time, let's go and create something, so that you go and do it. So I'm excited to see if we start entering that phase.
I mean, will we really see it? Like the passport assistant, like your person, like they know how to do it. And all it is a set of filling out forms and getting stuff from you. I don't know whether you paid $50 or $100 or something, but maybe that's down to like, here's my stuff, $5 for the passport assistant. Cause there is a lot of those things, but will that build out niche? How will that impact like that, low skill labor force? But it is fascinating if, like all these little bots, but then there's also the discovery, like, is Google going to have a discovery for them, right? Like, or something else, right? Because just because there's a passport bot out there, until I talk to you or someone, no one knows where it is. Like, so there's that too. So I don't know why this is in my head now, the passport bot. Because it is a pain.
Yeah, there we go. It's a new startup idea.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm most excited for what I call the last mile year that I think is to come. Even if there's no further innovation, the context window doesn't get bigger, the parameters don't go up, nothing changes. There's still 100 years of work to do deploying this into every nook and cranny of industry.
And then to your point, Kyle, like I would add to what you had mentioned about the last mile problem. So 2023, we saw a lot of hype, a lot of POCs. I think 2024 the eggs would come to hatch. So sort of, maybe in some industries, maybe somewhere. And so yeah, so I agree with you on that we will see a lot of those last mile problem issues, whether it is with respect to deployment, whether it is with respect to inference speed, whether it is respect to controlling this context that we want to generate, create, or update, and so forth. But we would see, in terms of like it being very hands on, we would see a lot of those missing pieces, I feel, starting to come together.
Exciting times for sure. Was there anywhere listeners can follow each of you online?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and then you can look at the main companies I'm working on or invested in, connectivity.com, and then itstrategist.com, snowflakesolutions.net. But I'd say predominantly social. It's on LinkedIn.
Yeah, same here as well. I'm on easily accessible on LinkedIn, Twitter, and it should be easy to access.
Well, thank you both for taking the time to catch up. This was really insightful, and I hope listeners enjoyed too.